In a small town, she was overlooked. At the academy, she was mocked. No one believed she could fly. But when 6 enemy jets crossed the sky, she had 20 minutes to prove them all wrong. Asterisk. If you enjoy stories of courage, resilience, and justice, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next story. In the quiet town of Millbrook, nestled in the rolling hills of Northern Virginia, life moved at its own deliberate pace. The streets were lined with maples and oaks, and on weekends, the hum of lawnmowers and the chatter of neighbors drifting across fences created a comforting rhythm. But for Emily Carter, the rhythm of the town often felt like a cage. Emily had grown up in Millbrook, the youngest of 3 children in a family that had served in the military for generations. Her father had been a decorated Air Force pilot, her mother a skilled mechanic who had spent decades keeping planes in top condition. Emily had inherited both their strengths, a sharp mind for machinery and a natural affinity for the skies. Yet, in a town like Millbrook, even extraordinary talent could be overlooked, especially when it came in the form of a young woman. From the moment she could walk, Emily had been fascinated with flight. She would spend hours staring at the planes, cutting across the sky above the nearby military base, tracing their paths with her finger in the air and imagining herself in the cockpit. By the time she was 10, she had built a collection of model airplanes that filled an entire corner of her bedroom, each meticulously crafted and painted, reflecting not just her love for flying, but her precise attention to detail. Despite her passion, Emily's talent had always been met with subtle dismissal. At school, boys would snicker when she talked about becoming a pilot. "Girls can't fly jets," they would say with an air of certainty, as if her dreams were laughable by default. Teachers, too, though kinder, often steered her toward more appropriate career paths. "Engineering is fine," one guidance counselor had said, "but maybe leave the flying to the boys." It wasn't just strangers or classmates who underestimated her. It was a pattern that ran through her life. Even at the local Air Force recruiting office, Emily had felt the weight of disbelief when she walked in wearing her flight suit for a preparatory test flight. The recruiters smiled politely, but she could sense the doubt in their eyes. As if her presence there was a strange anomaly rather than a natural step toward a career. Emily's response to all of this was quiet determination. She didn't argue, didn't cry. She simply trained harder. Every evening, she would run laps around the airfield, practice hand-eye coordination drills, and memorize flight manuals cover to cover. Her father noticed her intensity and occasionally offered advice, but mostly he let her learn through action, knowing that experience was the only teacher that would truly earn respect in the cockpit. By the time Emily was 22, she had earned a scholarship to a prestigious flight academy. The academy was competitive, with cadets from all over the country. Here, the subtle skepticism of small-town Millbrook had followed her, though in a different form. Male cadets whispered doubts, while instructors offered compliments that were tempered with hesitation. "You've got skill," one instructor had said during a simulator exercise, "but can you handle a real plane under fire?" Emily's jaw tightened, her hands gripping the controls. "Yes," she said simply. The instructor smirked, unconvinced, but she didn't need his approval. Even within her own dormitory, the atmosphere was challenging. Some cadets openly mocked her for her size, her calm demeanor, or the fact that she carried a notebook everywhere, recording every detail of flight patterns, maneuvers, and simulations. They called her the librarian, a nickname meant to belittle, but Emily wore it like armor. Every insult, every eye roll was fuel for her drive. Her closest friend at the academy, a fellow cadet named Marcus, often tried to lift her spirits. "Don't let them get in your head," he would say. "They're just scared of someone who actually knows what she's doing." But even he couldn't fully shield her from the constant undercurrent of doubt and ridicule. Emily's daily Routine became a quiet war of persistence. She woke before dawn, ran drills in the fading darkness, attended classes that seemed designed to test not just skill but patience, and spent late nights in the simulator room, perfecting every maneuver. Until her muscles ached and her eyes blurred. She learned to navigate complex aerial scenarios, anticipate enemy patterns, and make split-second decisions that could mean life or death in a real combat situation. The academy, though grueling, became Emily's proving ground. It was there, in the lonely hours of training, that her inner strength solidified. She discovered resilience she hadn't realized. She possessed a strategic mind that allowed her to outthink, not just outfly her opponents. And yet, despite her growing competence, the whisper of doubt from others never fully disappeared. Every compliment she received was tinged with surprise, every achievement a reminder that she had to fight harder to be seen as capable. One autumn evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the academy's runways in gold and crimson, Emily sat alone in the simulator room. She watched the virtual sky unfold before her, enemy jets streaking across the horizon, each scenario designed to push her limits. Her hands moved instinctively, fingers dancing over the controls, adjusting speed, altitude, and angle with precise calculation. And in that moment, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to fully embrace until now. Confidence. Not arrogance, not defiance, but a quiet certainty that she could rise above the doubts, the insults, and the stereotypes. She could not only fly, she could dominate. As Emily left the simulator that night, she looked out over the airfield, the distant hum of engines and the fading sunlight painting the sky. She knew the world outside the academy would continue to underestimate her. But she also knew something else. When the time came, when the moment demanded it, no one would doubt her abilities again. Little did Emily know that the opportunity to prove herself was closer than she realized, and that it would come in a way no one in Millbrook or the academy could have imagined. Winter settled over Millbrook with a quiet heaviness. The academy's runways glistened with frost, and cadets marched through the cold mornings with steaming breath and stiff determination. For Emily, the season only added another layer of challenge. Had become one of the academy's most consistent performers in the simulator, her name often appearing near the top of the scoreboard. But recognition was a tricky thing. Each time her results outshone the others, whispers followed. She must have gotten lucky. The program must be rigged. Nobody that quiet can really handle the pressure. The murmurs wore on her, not because she believed them, but because she understood what they revealed. No matter how hard she worked, many of her peers couldn't see her success without questioning its legitimacy. One morning during advanced maneuver drills, the tension boiled over. The cadets were lined up on the tarmac, preparing for a timed exercise involving tight turns and rapid climbs in small trainer jets. Captain Douglas, a stern man with decades of flight experience, explained the parameters: speed, control, precision. Mistakes meant elimination. Emily adjusted her helmet strap and kept her gaze forward, ignoring the cadet next to her, a tall young man named Ryan, known for his arrogance. He leaned closer, his voice low enough so only she could hear. "Ready to crash out there, Carter? Don't worry, we'll pull you out of the wreckage if you panic." Emily didn't flinch. She simply met his eyes for a brief moment, her expression calm, then turned back to her aircraft. Words weren't worth wasting. When it was her turn, the air crackled with anticipation. Ryan had flown before her, completing the drill in decent time but overshooting a turn and drawing a sharp rebuke from Captain Douglas. As Emily climbed into the cockpit, she could feel every eye on her. The engine roared, the world narrowed, and for those few minutes, nothing existed but the sky and the challenge before her. She executed each maneuver with fluid precision, her body moving in perfect sync with the machine. Tight turns, rapid climbs, clean rolls, the jet responded as if it trusted her completely. When she landed, the silence was heavy. Captain Douglas cleared his throat, glancing at his stopwatch. Fastest time of the day, near perfect execution. Ryan muttered something under his breath. Other cadets exchanged glances, some impressed, others unwilling to acknowledge what. They had just witnessed Emily climbed out of the cockpit, her helmet under her arm, her expression neutral. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She simply walked back to the line. But inside, a flicker of warmth glowed in her chest. She had not only passed, she had excelled. And though respect was slow to come, she knew moments like this planted seeds that could not be ignored forever. That night, in the quiet of her dorm, Emily sat at her desk and wrote in her notebook. Not just maneuvers or flight notes this time, but words that carried weight. They'll doubt until they can't. They'll mock until they see. My job is not to argue. My job is to fly. Her pen scratched the page slowly, deliberately, sealing the vow in ink. The months rolled on, and Emily's abilities grew sharper. She began to earn small acknowledgments from instructors' nods of approval, fewer corrections, occasional words of genuine praise. Yet the ridicule never completely faded. In fact, for some cadets, her progress only fueled resentment. During a tactical classroom exercise, when cadets were tasked with devising strategies for aerial defense, Emily's plan was chosen as the most effective. She had considered angles others overlooked, predicting enemy maneuvers with uncanny accuracy. The instructor praised her. But when class ended, Ryan and his friends cornered her in the hallway. "You think you're smarter than everyone else?" Ryan sneered. "You think you're better than me?" Emily didn't rise to the bait. She closed her notebook, looked him in the eye, and said evenly, "I don't think. I prepare." Then she walked away. The words lingered with him and with her. They weren't just a response. They were the truth she lived by. Preparation was her shield, her weapon, her quiet rebellion against every insult. Despite the strain, Emily found moments of solace. She called home often, speaking with her mother about life in Millbrook. Her father's health had begun to decline, his once strong voice now thinner, weaker. But he always ended their calls with the same phrase: "Emily, the sky doesn't care who doubts you. Fly it anyway." Those words became her anchor dot, and yet the world outside the academy seemed to grow more unstable by the day. News of rising international tensions filled the airwaves. Rumors spread among cadets that deployment might come sooner than expected. For many, the idea sparked fear. For Emily, it sparked resolve. She didn't seek battle, but if it came, she knew she was ready. Her chance to prove herself was approaching, though she couldn't see it yet. And when it came, it would shatter every doubt that had ever been cast her way. Spring came early to Millbrook that year. The snow melted fast, leaving the fields damp and the skies restless with shifting clouds. For Emily, it was a season of change, both in the world outside and in the life she was building inside the academy. She had settled into a rhythm: morning drills, flight training, late-night study. Her scores remained consistently high, her reputation slowly shifting from the quiet girl with big dreams to the cadet who couldn't be shaken. Even some of her harshest critics were beginning to take notice, though pride kept them from admitting it outright. Yet with every step forward, the weight of expectation grew heavier. Tension overseas was no longer just rumor. It was a constant shadow. Reports of aerial skirmishes, border disputes, and aggressive enemy maneuvers played across the television screens in the Academy's common room. Officers held closed door meetings more frequently. Whispers spread through the cadet ranks. One evening, as Emily sat alone in the simulator room, Captain Douglas appeared in the doorway. His presence filled the space with authority, his weathered face serious. "You spend more time in here than anyone else," he said, stepping closer. Emily straightened. "I like to be prepared, sir." Douglas studied her, arms crossed. "You're skilled, no denying that. But war isn't a simulator. Out there, lives are on the line. Panic sets in. Mistakes multiply." Emily met his gaze steadily. "Then I'll prepare for that too." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "We'll see." It wasn't exactly praise, but it was something, a recognition that he could no longer dismiss her outright. The Academy hosted a community day in early May, opening the gates to families and locals. Emily's mother came, her eyes bright with pride as she hugged her daughter tightly. Her father, too weak to travel, had written a letter instead. Emily unfolded it in her dorm later that night. The paper creased and the handwriting shaky. "My Emily, the world won't hand you respect. You'll have to take it. Not through anger, not through proving others wrong, but through doing what only you can do. When the moment comes, and it will, trust yourself. Trust the years you've spent preparing. I believe in you. Always." Tears stung her eyes as she read the words. She pressed the letter to her chest, breathing deeply. It was both a comfort and a burden, a reminder of the legacy she carried and the expectations she refused to let down. That summer, everything changed. The Academy received urgent orders. A hostile force had pushed into Allied airspace overseas. Pilots were being called up faster than expected. Some cadets would be deployed early, before graduation. The announcement hit the base like a THUNDERCL. AP.fear rippled through the ranks. Some cadets boasted bravado, pretending to welcome the chance to fight. Others grew quiet, their nerves betrayed by restless hands and sleepless nights. For Emily, the news settled in her chest like cold steel. This was the moment she had trained for, the storm her father's words had prepared her to face. She didn't crave combat, but she knew she couldn't shrink from it. Still, the Academy's hierarchy remained steeped in doubt. When names were drawn for potential deployment, Emily's wasn't on the first list. Ryan's was. So were several others, cadets with lesser records, shakier performances, but louder voices and more swagger. When Emily questioned the omission, privately, Captain Douglas offered only a curt explanation. Command makes the calls. Sometimes politics outweigh performance. It was a bitter truth, but not a surprising one. Emily swallowed the frustration, her resolve hardening. If she wasn't chosen, she would continue training. If the time came unexpectedly, she would be ready. And the time did come, in a way no one predicted. On a humid July morning, with the base half empty from recent deployments, an alarm shattered the air. Sirens wailed across the runways, soldiers and cadets rushing into action. Over the loudspeakers came the words that made Emily's blood run cold. Unidentified enemy aircraft inbound. All available pilots prepare for immediate response. It was unprecedented. The conflict had seemed oceans away. Now, enemy jets were approaching American soil. Chaos erupted. Instructors scrambled to organize defense teams. Cadets looked around in shock, some paralyzed by fear. The base had fewer active pilots on hand than usual. Too many were already overseas. Emily's heart pounded as she strapped on her gear. She wasn't on the duty roster. She wasn't supposed to fly. But as she looked around at the panic, the gaps in preparation, she knew hesitation could cost lives. In the control tower, officers debated furiously. "We don't have enough ready pilots," one shouted. "We'll have to use cadets." The words electrified the air. Cadets who had doubted, mocked, or dismissed Emily now fidgeted nervously, their earlier bravado gone. Ryan volunteered first, puffing his chest, but his eyes betrayed fear. Others hesitated, Emily stepped forward. Her voice was calm, steady. "Send me." The room went silent. Officers exchanged doubtful glances. "She's not cleared," one said. "She's not combat tested." Another added. Captain Douglas's voice cut through the noise. "She's more prepared than anyone here. Let her fly." The decision was made in seconds. Emily was cleared to launch Dot as she jogged toward the waiting jet. The other cadets stared in disbelief. Some whispered. Some scoffed. But none stepped forward to stop her. Helmet on, controls ready, heart steady. Emily took the cockpit like she had belonged there all along. The engines roared. The runway opened before her, and as she lifted into the sky, she knew there was no turning back. The enemy was coming. And for the first time, Emily would meet them head-on. The roar of the engines pressed against Emily's chest as her jet surged forward. The runway blurred beneath her, the horizon widening into an endless canvas of sky. She had taken off dozens of times before in training, but this was different. This wasn't practice. This was war. As the wheels lifted from the ground and the jet angled upward, Emily felt a rush of calm. The doubt, the whispers, the years of being underestimated, all of it faded beneath the clarity of purpose. There was only the mission now. "Carter, this is Tower. We've confirmed 6 enemy aircraft approaching from the east, low and fast. You're our first line until reinforcements arrive." Her hands tightened around the controls. 6 against 1. Any normal pilot might have panicked. Emily did not. She had spent her life preparing for impossible odds. "Copy that, Tower," she replied, her voice steady. "Engaging." The sky stretched wide and pale blue above her, the morning sun glinting off her canopy. Then, in the distance, she saw them. 6 black specks moving in formation, growing larger with each passing second. Enemy jets. Real enemy jets. Her pulse quickened, but she forced her breathing slow. She recalled every maneuver. She had studied, every tactic drilled into her mind. It would come fast, aggressive, confident in their numbers. She would have to be faster, smarter. The first missile streaked past her wing with a shriek. Emily rolled sharply, the jet responding as if it understood her intent. Smoke trailed behind her as she broke formation, drawing 2 of the enemy jets into pursuit. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself. "One at a time." She cut her throttle suddenly, the pursuing jets overshooting her position. In a fluid motion, she locked onto the nearest target and fired. The explosion bloomed in the sky, a burst of flame and smoke. One down. The second. Enemy jet veered hard, trying to shake her. Emily stayed with it, matching its movements with precision. Her training, her hours in the simulator, her endless nights of preparation, all of it came alive now. She fired again. Another burst lit. The sky. 2 down. Static crackled in her headset as the tower's voice returned. "Carter status? 2 down," she said calmly. "Engaging the rest." The remaining 4 enemy jets broke formation, spreading wide to box her in. Emily's jaw tightened. This was the trap. They thought they could surround her, overwhelm her, but she had studied maneuvers for this exact scenario. She dove sharply toward the ground, forcing them to follow. The earth rushed closer, fields and trees blurring beneath her. At the last possible moment, she pulled up hard, the G force pressing her into the seat. One enemy jet couldn't match her climb. It clipped a wing and spiraled into the ground. 3 left. Emily's muscles ached under the strain, but she pushed through, sweat dripping beneath her helmet. The remaining jets were aggressive now, firing in quick succession, trying to force her into a mistake. She danced between their shots, rolling, climbing, cutting speed at the last second. Her instincts sharpened. She wasn't just flying a machine anymore. She was part of it. Another missile lock. Another squeeze of the trigger. A fourth enemy jet vanished in fire. Two left, her chest heaved, lungs burning. She thought briefly of her father's letter. His words etched in her mind. Trust yourself. The last two jets came at her together, weaving to confuse her targeting. She let them push closer, closer, until their confidence turned into recklessness. At the last second, she rolled under them, flipping her jet in a tight arc. The maneuver had been one of the most difficult in training half. Her classmates couldn't complete it without stalling. But Emily made it look effortless. She fired. One jet disintegrated in midair. The last enemy broke off, trying to escape. Emily pursued, her jet screaming across the sky. She stayed locked, closing the distance inch by inch. The enemy pilot tried to outmaneuver her, but Emily anticipated every move. When the moment came, she fired her final shot. The sixth jet erupted. In flames, falling from the sky, silence filled her headset. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of her own breath. 6 enemy jets destroyed. 20 minutes. Then the tower's voice returned, choked with disbelief. Carter, confirm? Did you down all 6? Emily's voice was quiet, steady. 6 confirmed. The sky is clear. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar of applause. Everyone on the base had heard. Everyone who had doubted, mocked, or dismissed her, they all knew now. As Emily guided her jet back toward the runway, the reality of what she had done settled slowly over her. It wasn't triumph she felt. It wasn't pride. It was something deeper, heavier, the knowledge that she had proven, once and for all, that she belonged. And yet, she knew this was only the beginning, because back on the ground, the same people who had doubted her would now have to face the truth. And the truth would change everything. The runway stretched out beneath Emily's jet, shimmering in the heat of late morning. Her hands were steady on the controls, but inside her chest, her heart still beat with the rhythm of battle. As the wheels touched the ground and the jet screeched to a halt, silence settled in the cockpit, the kind of silence that only comes after surviving something no one thought possible. She taxied toward the hangar, and as she climbed down from the cockpit, the world around her seemed frozen. Mechanics, officers, and cadets all stood staring, their expressions caught between disbelief and awe. For years, those same eyes had looked at her with doubt, some with ridicule, others with pity. Now they followed her every step, wide with shock. No one spoke. Not at first. Then Captain Douglas broke the silence. His voice rang out across the tarmac. 6 enemy jets. 20 minutes. He let the words hang, heavy with meaning. That's not luck. That's not chance. That's a pilot. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. For the first time, Emily saw not doubt in their faces, but respect, raw and unguarded. Ryan, who had mocked her at every opportunity, stood in the back, his jaw tight. His usual smirk was gone. He didn't say a word, but the look in his eyes said everything. He couldn't deny what he had witnessed. None of them could. Emily didn't bask in the moment. She didn't raise her arms in victory or smile for the crowd. She simply removed her helmet, tucked it under her arm, and walked past them with the same calm determination she had always carried. Inside, though, something shifted. Not pride, exactly, but a release. Years of silence, years of bearing. Others' doubts had led to this moment. And now, there was nothing left to prove. Later that day, the debriefing room buzzed with tension. High-ranking officers sat around a long table, reviewing radar footage, combat logs, and recordings from Emily's flight. She sat at the far end, hands folded, answering questions with quiet precision. You engaged 6 enemy aircraft without backup? One colonel asked, disbelief etched across his face. Yes, sir. And you destroyed all 6? Yes, sir. The room fell silent. One officer leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. Unprecedented. Captain Douglas, seated nearby, spoke firmly. She did what no one else could. You may not have wanted her in that cockpit, but today she was the only reason we still control this airfield. Emily kept her gaze steady. She wasn't looking for praise. She was looking for acknowledgement, not for herself alone, but for every unrecognized, underestimated person who had ever been told they weren't enough. When the debriefing ended, several officers approached. Their handshakes were firm, their words brief but sincere. Good work, Lieutenant Carter. Outstanding flying. We'll be needing you again. The titles and respect that had been withheld for so long were now offered freely. And yet, Emily felt the weight of them deeply. They weren't a prize. They were a responsibility. News traveled quickly. By evening, Millbrook was buzzing with reports. The local paper ran a headline: Millbrook woman downed 6 enemy jets in historic battle. At the diner where Emily had once overheard townsfolk dismiss her dreams, people now spoke her name with pride. Her mother, sitting at the kitchen table with neighbors, listened as they marveled at Emily's courage. We didn't know she was. Pilot, one said. We didn't think she had it in her. Her mother only smiled softly. She's had it in her all along. You just never looked close enough. Back at the academy, cadets whispered her name in hushed tones. Some, embarrassed by their past insults, avoided her altogether. Others, humbled, approached her with genuine admiration. Even Marcus, her closest friend, looked at her differently now, not with surprise, but with a quiet respect that came from knowing she had carried the weight of doubt and turned it into triumph. Ryan, however, remained silent. Pride kept him from admitting what he felt, but Emily didn't need his words. His silence was louder than anything he could have said. But for Emily, victory came with a new kind of burden. That night, alone in her dorm, she stared at her father's letter again. The words blurred with tears she had held back all day. She had proven herself. She had earned respect. But the cost of what she had done weighed heavily on her chest. 6 enemy pilots would never return home. 6 families would grieve. She hadn't sought glory, only defense. And though the world would call her a hero, Emily knew the truth. Heroes don't celebrate battles. They carry them. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. The sky doesn't care who doubts you. Fly it anyway. She whispered the words to herself. A vow renewed. The world might finally see her as a pilot. But she would always remember the silence. Between victories, the silence that came after the smoke cleared, when the only thing left was the weight of what it meant to fight. And though she didn't know it yet, that silence would soon give way to something more. A twist that would change her place in the academy, in her town, and in the history of the skies forever. The weeks that followed Emily's 20 minutes in the sky were unlike anything she had ever experienced. Reporters called daily. National news stations carried her story, showing blurry radar footage of her flight, painting her as a symbol of courage. At the academy, her name was whispered with reverence. Cadets who once mocked her now watched her with awe, though few dared to approach her directly. She became, almost overnight, a legend. And yet Emily felt strangely detached from it all. She didn't crave the headlines. She didn't want the spotlight. She wanted the truth of who she was, why she had done what she did, and what it would mean going forward. But the truth, she soon learned, was more complicated than anyone outside suspected. 2 weeks after the battle, Emily was called into a private meeting with senior officers. The room was smaller than the debriefing chamber, but the atmosphere was heavier. Men in suits sat alongside decorated generals, their expressions unreadable. One of them spoke first. Lieutenant Carter, You understand the sensitivity of what happened. Yes, sir. You understand that the public is enthusiastic. They see you as a hero. Emily nodded, but she said nothing. She could tell there was more. The man leaned forward. Here's what you don't understand. Officially, you weren't supposed to fly that day. Officially, you weren't cleared for combat. Emily's jaw tightened. She knew this already. And yet, the man continued, you destroyed 6 enemy jets. If word gets out that an unapproved cadet defended American soil while half our qualified pilots were absent, he trailed off, letting the weight of his words settle. Emily sat straighter. Then the public will know the truth. Another officer spoke, his tone sharper. The truth isn't always convenient, Carter. Command wants to frame this as a team effort. We can't afford to admit that we were caught unprepared and that a cadet had to do the job of trained officers. Emily's stomach turned. They wanted to bury it. They wanted to reduce her 20 minutes in the sky to a footnote, or worse, erase her from the story entirely. She clenched her hands in her lap. With respect, sir. People already know. You can't take it back. The room grew tense. Finally, Captain Douglas, who had been silent until now, spoke firmly. If you silence her, you silence the truth. The cadets saw it. The base saw it. You can't rewrite what happened up there. The room fell quiet. The men in suits exchanged looks. The meeting ended without resolution, but Emily walked out with her heart pounding. She understood now that the battle wasn't just in the skies. It was here too, on the ground, against politics, against pride, against a system that didn't want to admit it had been wrong. Back in Millbrook, the town threw a parade in her honor. The streets she had once walked unnoticed were now filled with flags and banners. Children waved, elders clapped, and her mother stood proudly in the front row. Ryan was there too, though he kept to the sidelines. For the first time, his eyes held no mockery, no jealousy, only something that looked like shame. He gave a small nod as she passed. Emily returned it. That was enough. At the town's war memorial, Emily spoke briefly to the crowd. Her words were simple, spoken with the same clarity she had carried in the cockpit. I didn't fight for glory. I didn't fight for recognition. I fought because it was my duty, because people's lives depended on it. I am not the only one capable of this. There are others among you who are underestimated, overlooked, doubted. Don't let that stop you. When the moment comes, rise to it. Because the sky doesn't care who you are. It only cares if you can fly. The crowd erupted in applause, but Emily's eyes found her mother's, filled with tears and pride. That was the only applause she needed. Weeks later, the twist came. The military finally released the official report of the battle. To Emily's surprise, it did not erase her role. Instead, it named her directly. Lieutenant Emily Carter, sole pilot. Engaged, 6 confirmed kills. The truth had one. It was more than just acknowledgement. It was vindication, not just for Emily, but for every insult, every dismissal, every time she had been told she wasn't enough. Her story was now part of history, untouchable and undeniable. But the real twist came in the letter she received. The next day, it was from her father's old commanding officer, now retired. The handwriting was steady, the words clear. Emily, I served with your father for years. He always said you had his gift, though I think you've surpassed even him. You didn't just defend your country. You defended the truth, that courage, skill, and determination know no gender, no boundary. That is your legacy now. Don't ever let them take it from you. Respectfully, Colonel James Warren, Ret. Emily folded the letter carefully and placed it beside her father's. 2 voices now, guiding her. On a warm September evening, Emily stood at the edge of the airfield, watching the sunset blaze across. The sky, the same sky she had once looked at as a child, dreaming of flight. The same sky she had claimed in 20 minutes of fire and steel dot behind her. The academy moved with new energy. Cadets trained harder, instructors taught with sharper eyes, and among the new recruits, young women walked taller, no longer dismissed before they began. Emily smiled softly. She hadn't just flown that day. She had changed the course of things. World might remember her as the pilot who downed 6 jets in 20 minutes. But Emily Carter knew the truth. Her real victory was not in the enemies she defeated, but in the respect she had earned, the truth she had defended, and the future she had opened for others who would rise after her. The sky had tested her, and she had answered.